Hello, I'm Kelsey Grammer, and welcome to the new set of Frasier, or Dr. Frasier Crane.
They've got really fine pieces of furniture. It doesn't matter if they match, they will go together. It's your money.
From a dog who literally couldn't stand his co-stars to a character invented because of a remarkable facial resemblance, the beloved 90s sitcom Frasier hides some truly bizarre stories beneath its cultured Seattle exterior. Behind those witty one-liners and opera references lurked celebrity interventions, furniture made from deliberately hideous fabric, and a rivalry between man and terrier. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Frasier. Fact 1. Eddie was a rescued nightmare dog.
This is my father, Martin Crane. Dad, this is Daphne Moon.
Nice to meet you. Oh, and who might this be?
That is Eddie.
Before Moose became one of television's most beloved canine actors, he was what his original owners considered an absolute disaster of a pet. The Jack Russell Terrier, who would eventually play Eddie on Frasier, started his life in Florida with a family who quickly discovered they were in way over their heads. Moose wasn't just a handful or mildly misbehaved, he was genuinely destructive and seemingly impossible to control. His owners tried everything they could think of, but nothing worked. The energetic dog climbed trees to escape from their yard, which is already unusual behavior for most dogs. He killed a neighbor's cat, creating tension in the community. Most dramatically, Moose managed to destroy not one, but 2 entire houses with his relentless chewing, digging, and general chaos. His frustrated family finally gave up and surrendered him to a professional animal trainer named Matilda DeCagny, who specialized in working with difficult dogs. What his original owners saw as untrainable chaos, DeCagny recognized as raw intelligence and boundless energy that just needed proper direction. She worked intensively with Moose, channeling his wild behavior into precise, disciplined performance skills. The transformation was remarkable. Within months, the dog who had been too much trouble for a regular household was performing complex tricks and following commands with impressive accuracy. When casting began for Frasier, DeCagny brought Moose to audition, and his expressive face and sharp focus won him the role immediately. The nightmare dog had become a professional actor, proving that sometimes the most difficult animals just need the right job to shine. Fact 2. Kelsey Grammer's requisite disrespect method.
Niles, just remember to keep breathing. And trust me, this is not the end. Your life is not over. Niles! Niles!
Kelsey Grammer approached his work on Frasier with an acting philosophy that many of his colleagues found frustrating and unconventional, but which he believed was essential to his best performances. Rather than the traditional approach of rehearsing scenes multiple times until every line and movement became second nature, Grammer deliberately limited himself to rehearsing each scene only once. He would then learn his lines just moments before the camera started rolling, keeping the dialogue fresh in his mind, but not yet fully ingrained into muscle memory. Grammer called this his requisite disrespect for the material, a technique he felt brought spontaneity and authentic energy to his performance. In his view, knowing the lines too well made his delivery feel stale and overly rehearsed, robbing his character of the natural unpredictability that real conversations possess. By keeping himself slightly on edge and forcing his brain to actively retrieve the words rather than reciting them automatically, he believed he captured something more genuine and alive on screen. However, this personal method created real challenges for guest stars and supporting actors who worked with him. Many guest performers prepared extensively for their appearances on the hit show, memorizing their lines thoroughly and expecting their scene partners to do the same. Instead, they found themselves working opposite an actor who seemed almost cavalier about preparation, sometimes stumbling slightly or pausing in unexpected ways. Some found it charming and thought it created interesting moments, while others found it unprofessional and difficult to work around, never quite knowing if Grammer would deliver his lines as written or improvise slightly due to his last-minute preparation. Fact 3. Lisa Kudrow was fired before filming.
That Lisa Kudrow was on Frasier playing Roz, and in the middle of rehearsal week of the pilot, they felt it just wasn't the right fit, and they fired her. And
before Perry Gilpin became the quick-witted radio producer Roz Doyle, another actress had already been cast in the role and was actively rehearsing for the show's premiere. Lisa Kudrow, who would go on to become a household name as Phoebe Buffay on Friends, was originally hired to play Roz during Frasier's pre-production phase in 1993. The casting seemed promising on paper, and Kudrow began working with the cast during the initial rehearsal period, learning her lines and developing the character alongside Kelsey Grammer and the rest of the ensemble. However, by the third day of rehearsals, the show's producers and creators began to notice a fundamental problem with the casting choice. The chemistry between Kudrow and Grammer wasn't working the way they had envisioned. Specifically, they felt that Kudrow's natural performance style was too gentle and lacked the sharp, forceful energy that the character of Roz required. Roz needed to be Frasier's equal at work, someone who could verbally spar with him, push back against his pomposity, and hold her own in rapid-fire exchanges. The producers worried that Kudrow's softer approach would make Roz seem overshadowed by Grammer's powerful stage presence, rather than standing up to it. Making the difficult decision to recast before filming even began, they let Kudrow go and brought in Perry Gilpin, whose more assertive delivery style immediately clicked with the show's dynamics. While being fired must have been disappointing at the time, Kudrow's career took off spectacularly just a year later when Friends premiered in 1994, ultimately making her far more famous than she likely would have become as a supporting character on Frasier. Fact 4. The theme song's bizarre, hidden meaning.
I actually said to the producers, oh, by the way, I'm going to sing this song. Because I always wanted to sing a theme song. I thought, well, it's my time. This is the only shot I'll ever have. So I told them I'm doing the theme song. They said,
the opening theme song of Frasier features one of the most peculiar and cryptic lyrics in television history, and the story behind those words reveals just how specific and unusual the creative restrictions were during the show's development. When Kelsey Grammer wrote and performed the theme song, titled Tossed Salads and Scrambled Eggs, he was working under a very particular set of guidelines from the show's producers. They had explicitly banned him from including any direct references to psychiatry, radio broadcasting, or even the show's title in the theme lyrics. This left Grammer with the challenge of somehow capturing the essence of what Frasier Crane did for a living without actually saying what he did. The solution he came up with was deliberately abstract and metaphorical. The phrase, tossed salad and scrambled eggs, was his way of describing Frasier's radio callers and psychiatric patients as being mixed up or confused, needing help to sort through their tangled problems. The scrambled eggs represented minds that were jumbled and needed untangling, while the tossed salad suggested lives that had been thrown together haphazardly. The full lyric continues with phrases about not knowing what to do with these tossed salads and scrambled eggs, mirroring Frasier's daily challenge of helping people whose lives and minds are in disarray. What makes this even stranger is that Grammer deliberately kept the lyrics vague and surreal enough that most viewers assumed they were just nonsense words chosen because they sounded good together. For years, audiences sang along to the catchy tune without realizing there was any deeper meaning at all, thinking it was simply a quirky, meaningless jazz standard rather than a coded description of psychiatric work disguised as a recipe gone wrong. Fact 5. Martin's chair was intentionally made hideous.
Wait, honesty, this is good. I'm just saying that I've had a bit of a breakthrough.
Oh, dandy, you've had a breakthrough and I've lost my chair. Maybe I could sit on your breakthrough.
One of the most memorable visual gags in Frasier was the stark contrast between Frasier's elegant, expensive apartment and his father Martin's beloved recliner, which looked like it belonged in a completely different show. That clash wasn't accidental or the result of finding some random ugly chair at a second-hand store. The production design team actually custom-built Martin's chair specifically for the show, with the explicit goal of making it as visually offensive as possible. The set designers started with a clear mission. They needed to create a piece of furniture that would make viewers immediately understand the culture clash between the refined, sophisticated Frasier and his working-class father. They wanted something that would make Frasier's horror at having this chair in his pristine apartment completely believable. To achieve this, they hunted through fabric archives until they found an offcut of original 1970s upholstery material in a particularly unfortunate shade of olive green with an outdated pattern. This wasn't fabric that looked like it was from the 70s. It actually was vintage 1970s material that had been sitting in storage for nearly 20 years. They chose this specific piece because it represented everything that high-end interior design in the 1990s was trying to move away from. The chair was then deliberately constructed to look worn and shabby, with visible stains and a general air of having survived decades of heavy use. The contrast was made even more dramatic by the apartment itself, which the production designers filled with art and furniture worth approximately $500,000 in total, including genuine designer pieces and expensive art. Every time Martin's chair appeared on screen, sitting in the middle of all that carefully curated elegance, it was exactly as jarring and wrong as the designers had intended. Fact 6. Niles wasn't supposed to exist.
I hate your unicorn collection.
I hate that your closet is bigger than mine.
You're too tall.
You're too short.
When Frasier was first being developed as a spin-off from Cheers, the character of Niles Crane didn't exist in any of the early scripts or planning documents. The show's creators had no intention of giving Frasier a brother, partly because they had just finished working on Wings, which centered on two brothers, and they didn't want to repeat that dynamic. However, during the casting process for other roles, something remarkable happened that changed the entire direction of the series. When David Hyde Pierce came in to audition for a completely different part, the casting directors were struck by his uncanny physical resemblance to a younger Kelsey Grammer. The similarity was almost eerie. They shared facial features, mannerisms, and even similar body language. Someone in the room made the observation that Pierce looked like he could actually be Grammer's brother, and that comment sparked an immediate creative conversation. The producers and writers quickly realized they had stumbled onto something special. If they created a brother character specifically for Pierce, they could build in a visual joke that would work every single episode without anyone ever having to mention it directly. Audiences would see the resemblance immediately and accept them as siblings without question. More importantly, they recognized that Pierce's acting style, which was similar to but distinct from Grammer's theatrical approach, would create fascinating dynamics. Within a short time, they had completely reimagined the show's structure to include Niles, making him not just Frasier's brother, but almost a mirror version of him, equally pretentious, equally cultured, but somehow even more neurotic and repressed. The character became so central to the show's success that it's almost impossible to imagine Frasier without him, yet he was created entirely by accident based on one actor's face. Fact 7. Eddie got more fan mail than the stars.
Boy, Eddie, just get down. Good. Eddie, get down. Get down! Dad! I can't read my paper. Eddie's staring at me.
Despite Frasier featuring multiple Emmy-winning actors and being built around Kelsey Grammer's star power, the cast member who received the most fan mail throughout the show's run wasn't any of the human performers. Moose, the Jack Russell Terrier who played Eddie, consistently received more letters, cards, and packages from viewers than Grammer, David Hyde Pierce, John Mahoney, or any of the other actors. Fans were completely captivated by the expressive little dog and wrote to him constantly, sending everything from heartfelt letters about how much they loved Eddie to gifts and treats meant specifically for Moose himself. The volume of Eddie's fan mail wasn't just slightly higher than the human cast members. It was significantly and consistently more, week after week, year after year. This popularity extended beyond just letters from viewers. In 1996, Entertainment Weekly magazine made the unprecedented decision to feature Moose alone on their cover, without any of the human cast members accompanying him. This was essentially unheard of for a television animal performer and underscored just how famous Eddie had become. For Kelsey Grammer, who was the show's undisputed star and lead actor, this situation created genuine feelings of jealousy and frustration. Grammer was open about the fact that he resented being upstaged by a dog, and he wasn't particularly fond of Moose on set. The dynamic created an ironic parallel to the show itself, where Frasier was constantly irritated by Eddie's attention-stealing antics and the way Martin doted on the dog. Life was imitating art, with Grammer experiencing the same annoyance that his character felt, watching a Jack Russell Terrier somehow become more beloved than the supposedly sophisticated psychiatrist who was meant to be the center of attention. Fact 8. The dog refused affection from cast.
What? Oh, do you want to know what's bothering me too? All right, well, here's a start. I'm talking to a dog. That bothers me.
Moose's professionalism on the set of Frasier extended far beyond simply following commands and hitting his marks. His trainer, Matilda DeCagny, had worked with him so intensively and established such a strong bond that Moose essentially refused to form emotional connections with anyone else. Throughout the entire 11-year run of the show, Moose never bonded with any of the human cast members in the way that pet dogs typically become affectionate with people they see regularly. He viewed the set as his workplace and the actors as colleagues rather than friends or family. Between takes, Moose wouldn't seek out cuddles from John Mahoney, who played his on-screen owner Martin, nor would he play with the other cast members or show them affection. His focus remained entirely on DeCagny, the only person he responded to with genuine warmth and attachment. This complete lack of emotional connection actually created a somewhat strange atmosphere on set, because everyone was working with an animal who seemed entirely indifferent to them as people. John Mahoney, who spent more time acting opposite Moose than anyone else on the show, eventually developed an unusual perspective on their working relationship. In interviews, Mahoney admitted that he stopped thinking of Eddie as a dog in the traditional sense. Instead, he mentally categorized Moose as simply another actor who happened to have 4 legs. It was easier to think of Eddie as a professional colleague who showed up to do a job rather than as a pet who inexplicably didn't like him. This psychological adjustment helped Mahoney deal with the slightly surreal experience of spending years performing scenes with an animal who would stare at him perfectly on camera, but then completely ignore him the moment the director called cut. Fact 9. Father and son hated each other.
Easy now, you look great.
Don't BS me, I do not look great. I spent Monday on the bathroom floor. You can still see the tile marks on my face.
As Moose aged during Frasier's later seasons, the production team gradually transitioned to using his son, Enzo, to take over the role of Eddie for more physically demanding scenes or when Moose needed rest. This arrangement created a practical solution to the challenge of having an aging dog continue to perform tricks and actions that required youth and energy. However, it also created an unexpected problem that made scheduling significantly more complicated. According to their trainer, Matilda DeCagny, Moose and Enzo genuinely could not stand each other. This wasn't a matter of mild canine annoyance or occasional growling. Father and son had such a strong mutual dislike that they couldn't be in the same room together without becoming aggressive and stressed. The hostility between them was so intense that the production team had to carefully coordinate their schedules to ensure the 2 dogs never overlapped on set. When Moose was working, Enzo had to be kept completely separate, usually waiting in a different location entirely. When it was time for Enzo to perform, Moose had to be removed from the area first. This made certain filming days more logistically challenging than they would have been otherwise, essentially requiring the production to manage 2 separate canine actors who refused to acknowledge each other's existence peacefully. The reason for their mutual hatred was never entirely clear, though animal behaviorists who heard about the situation suggested it might have stemmed from dominance issues or territorial behavior that developed during Enzo's training. Regardless of the cause, it created a genuinely bizarre behind-the-scenes situation where the two dogs playing the same beloved character across different episodes were essentially mortal enemies who had to be kept apart, like feuding actors in a troubled production. Fact 10. Sardine oil made, Eddie Kiss actors.
No, not Eddie.
But he's my best friend. Give me my beer, will
But
you?
he's weird. Gives me the creeps. All he does is stare at me.
One of Eddie's most memorable behaviors on Frasier was his tendency to stare intensely at characters, particularly Frasier himself, and occasionally lick or nuzzle the actors in moments of apparent affection. These interactions always seemed spontaneous and natural, as if Eddie was genuinely expressing emotion or responding to the scene's dramatic beats. However, the reality behind these tender moments was considerably less romantic and significantly more fishy. To get Moose to lick an actor's face or nuzzle against them on cue, the production team used various food-based scents and substances that would attract the dog's attention and encourage him to make contact. The most commonly used attractant was sardine oil, which crew members would carefully dab onto actors' faces before scenes where Eddie needed to show affection. The oil was nearly invisible on camera, but created a scent that Moose found irresistible, causing him to lean in and lick enthusiastically. For scenes requiring Eddie to nuzzle against someone's neck or ear, the production team had a different trick. They would apply liver pate behind the actor's ears, hidden from the camera's view but perfectly positioned to draw Moose's interest. This meant that actors knew in advance when they were going to get a face full of dog tongue, giving them time to mentally prepare for the sensation of being licked while trying to stay in character. The use of these food products was so routine that it became just another part of the technical setup before shooting, no different from adjusting lighting or checking sound levels. What viewers saw as Eddie spontaneously showing love was actually a highly calculated production technique, with actors essentially turning themselves into human appetizers to get the right performance from their canine co-star. Fact 11. Grammer played Frasier for 20 consecutive years.
Opening that window, you're opening up a window to a long and happy marriage. That's good.
Kelsey Grammer's portrayal of Frasier Crane represents one of the longest continuous character performances in television history, spanning an extraordinary period that few actors have ever matched. Grammer first stepped into the role of the pompous psychiatrist in 1984, when Frasier was introduced as a recurring character on Cheers. The character was originally intended to appear in only a few episodes as a love interest for Diane Chambers, but audiences responded so positively that Frasier became a regular part of the Cheers ensemble. Grammer continued playing the character throughout Cheers' remaining seasons until that show ended in 1993. Then, immediately and without any break, Frasier spun off into his own series, which premiered in September of 1993 and ran until May of 2004. This meant that Grammer played the same character in primetime television for 20 consecutive years without interruption, an almost unprecedented achievement. When Frasier ended, Grammer's 20-year run tied him with James Arness, who had played Marshal Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke for 20 seasons, for the longest-running character portrayal by a single actor in American television history at that time. The consistency of Grammer's performance across two different shows and two distinct character arcs, from Cheers' insufferable know-it-all to Frasier's more vulnerable and sympathetic protagonist, demonstrated remarkable range within what remained recognizably the same person. Audiences watched Frasier Crane grow, change, fail, succeed, and evolve for 2 full decades, creating an unusual sense of intimacy and familiarity. Few fictional characters have had the opportunity to develop across such an extended timeline, and fewer still have been brought to life by the same actor for the entire journey without recasting or interruption. Fact 12. The Space Needle kept disappearing.
Oh, for goodness sake, Frasier, I'm a happily married man. Maris means the world to me. Why, just the other day, I kissed her for no reason whatsoever.
Throughout Frasier's 11 seasons, careful viewers occasionally noticed a significant and rather glaring continuity error involving one of Seattle's most iconic landmarks. The Space Needle, which should have been visible from Frasier's apartment windows, given the supposed location of his building, appeared and disappeared seemingly at random from episode to episode. In some episodes, the distinctive tower stood prominently in the skyline, visible through Frasier's windows, exactly where you would expect it to be. However, in other episodes, sometimes even within the same season, the Space Needle was completely absent from the view, with the cityscape looking noticeably different and the famous structure nowhere to be seen. This wasn't a matter of different camera angles or times of day affecting visibility. The Space Needle was literally present in some episodes and gone in others, suggesting that the backdrop itself was being changed. The reason for this inconsistency likely related to the fact that Frasier's apartment was a studio set rather than a real location, with the window views created using various backdrop techniques. Different backdrops were probably used at different times during production, and not all of them included the Space Needle or placed it in the same position. While most casual viewers never noticed the disappearing landmark, Seattle natives and detail-oriented fans who watched episodes multiple times began catching the error and discussing it online. The continuity mistake became one of those small imperfections that dedicated fans learned to spot and enjoy pointing out, similar to how viewers of other shows notice minor prop placement errors or changing background details. Despite being set so specifically in Seattle and making such frequent reference to local culture and locations, Frasier apparently couldn't keep its most famous landmark consistently visible. Fact 13. A record-breaking 37 Emmy Awards.
Oh, how she loved the game. No wonder. The king is stationary while the queen has all the power.
Frasier didn't just win Emmy Awards, it absolutely dominated them in a way that few television shows have, before or since. Over the course of its 11-season run from 1993 to 2004, the show accumulated an astounding 37 Primetime Emmy Awards across various categories. This wasn't just a respectable number of wins for a sitcom, it was a television record that shattered the previous benchmark. Before Frasier, The Mary Tyler Moore Show held the record for most Emmy wins by a series, a record that had stood unchallenged for years as a testament to that groundbreaking comedy's excellence. Frasier surpassed it decisively, establishing a new standard for Emmy success that seemed nearly impossible to beat. The wins weren't concentrated in just one or two categories either. Frasier won for Outstanding Comedy Series 5 consecutive years in a row, along with numerous acting awards for its ensemble cast, writing awards, directing awards, and technical awards for everything from sound mixing to art direction. The show's dominance was so complete during its mid-90s peak that Emmy ceremonies became somewhat predictable, with Frasier expected to take home multiple trophies each year. For 12 years, Frasier's 37 Emmy record stood as the high-water mark for television achievement. However, in 2016, Game of Thrones surpassed it by winning its 38th Emmy Award, finally breaking Frasier's long-held record. Even so, the fact that a half-hour sitcom held the record for total Emmy wins for over a decade, outlasting countless dramas, limited series, and other ambitious productions, speaks to just how exceptional Frasier was during its original run. Fact 14. Celebrity phone callers literally phoned it.
I took action, Russell. And you can too. Move, change, do something. If it's a mistake, do something else. Will you do that, Russell? Will you?
In one of Frasier's most memorable recurring elements was the parade of celebrity guest voices who called in to Frasier's radio show with various problems and neuroses. Over the course of the series, an impressive roster of famous names provided voices for these unseen callers, including Kevin Bacon, Halle Berry, Stephen King, Carrie Fisher, Gary Sinise, and many others. What made these guest appearances unusual was how they were actually recorded. Unlike typical television guest stars who come to the set, work with the cast, and record their dialogue in a professional studio environment, most of Frasier's celebrity phone callers never visited the production at all. Instead, they literally phoned in their performances by calling a recording line and delivering their dialogue over an actual telephone. This arrangement meant that some extremely famous actors recorded their Frasier appearances from wherever they happened to be at the moment, using whatever phone was convenient. Some called from payphones while they were out running errands. Others recorded their lines from their home phones while holding babies or sitting in their kitchens. The recording quality was sometimes less than ideal because they weren't using professional microphone equipment, but the slight telephone line distortion actually added to the authenticity of the scenes, making it sound exactly like real radio callers would sound. This casual approach to celebrity guest appearances benefited both the show and the guest stars. Frasier got famous names attached to episodes without the cost and scheduling complexity of bringing actors to set, while celebrities could make a quick appearance on a hit show without disrupting their schedules or traveling to a studio. The arrangement was so successful that it became standard practice for the show's phone caller guest spots. Fact 15. Martin's father was dead, then alive.
It would be very hard to walk into this apartment and see that chair and know that Dad wasn't here anymore.
Oh, I'd get rid of that chair immediately.
One of the most significant plot holes between Cheers and Frasier involves the very existence of Martin Crane, Frasier's father, who became a central character in the spin-off series. During Frasier's time on Cheers, he explicitly stated on multiple occasions that his father was dead. This wasn't a vague reference or something that could be interpreted differently. Frasier clearly and directly said his father had passed away, establishing it as a firm fact about his background. However, when the Frasier spin-off was developed, the creators made the creative decision that giving Frasier a living father would create better storytelling opportunities and character dynamics. They wanted to explore the relationship between the cultured, pretentious Frasier and a working-class father with completely different values and interests. The problem was that this directly contradicted what had been established on Cheers, creating an obvious continuity error that longtime viewers would immediately notice. Rather than ignoring the contradiction and hoping audiences wouldn't remember or care, the Frasier writers eventually decided to address it directly in a later episode. They crafted a scene where this discrepancy was explained away by having it revealed that Frasier had lied about his father being dead during one of his many arguments with Martin. The explanation suggested that Frasier had been so angry at his father at some point that he had told people Martin was dead, essentially disowning him emotionally. While this retroactive explanation attempted to patch the plot hole, it raised almost as many questions as it answered, because it meant Frasier had maintained this lie consistently throughout his years in Boston and never corrected anyone.